On a warm January night in 1996, the town of Varginha in Brazil lay in quiet repose. Nestled amidst gently rolling hills and patches of dense forest, the town seemed as though it had been untouched by the outside world, a small enclave where life moved at a leisurely pace. The streets were mostly empty, lit softly by flickering lamps that cast long shadows across the cobblestones. In the distance, the hum of nocturnal insects filled the air, punctuated by the occasional bark of a dog or the soft creaking of a swinging sign outside a closed shop. The scent of wet earth and tropical vegetation mingled with the distant aroma of cooking fires, carrying a sense of life both ordinary and timeless. It was the kind of night where a gentle breeze whispered secrets through the trees, inviting anyone who listened to drift into quiet contemplation. In such a serene setting, few could have imagined that a series of events was about to unfold that would quietly ripple across the globe. The calm of Varginha would soon be punctuated by whispers of strange lights in the sky, unexplainable shadows along deserted streets, and fleeting glimpses of something no one could fully describe. Yet, in the moment, the town remained blissfully unaware. Families rested behind closed doors, children dreamed beneath cool blankets, and the occasional passerby walked home slowly, enjoying the warmth and stillness of a tropical night. The ordinary rhythm of life had a comforting, almost hypnotic cadence, allowing the mind to settle into gentle calmness, unaware that reality itself was about to feel slightly unsettled. It began subtly. First, with a flicker of movement across the horizon, lights that seemed to hover and glide with a purpose beyond human understanding. Some described them as reddish-orange, like embers floating against a black velvet sky, while others saw them as metallic glimmers reflecting moonlight. There was no roar of engines, no familiar hum of aircraft, only a quiet alien grace as the objects moved in patterns that defied conventional explanation. Residents would later recount feeling a strange sense of anticipation, a mixture of awe and unease, as if the world had shifted slightly out of alignment. The quiet hills and dense woods seemed to amplify every sound, every rustle of leaves, and every distant cry, creating an almost cinematic setting for events that would become legendary. As the night deepened, unusual sightings began to gather in fragments, whispered among neighbors in cautious conversation. Farmers returning from late chores reported strange shapes lingering near the outskirts of town, creatures that moved differently than any animal they knew. The shadows of trees seemed to twist unnaturally, and the air occasionally carried a faint, unfamiliar scent, earthy yet metallic, lingering like a memory one could almost place, but never quite recognize. It was in this way, through small but persistent details, that the fabric of normalcy began to fray, not violently, but with a slow, gentle creep, like mist rolling over a hillside. In the heart of Varginha, a group of young women would later emerge as key witnesses, though at the time, they simply walked home along quiet streets, unaware that their ordinary evening would soon intersect with the extraordinary. Their eyes, accustomed to familiar surroundings, caught something out of place, a small crouching figure, unlike any human child they had ever seen. Its eyes, red and bulging, seemed to glint faintly in the dim light. Its movements were deliberate yet cautious, as if the creature understood it was being watched, yet could not fully hide from those observing. The sense of curiosity mixed with fear etched itself into the memory of the night, a memory that would ripple outward, eventually drawing attention far beyond Varginha's sleepy borders. Even as these events unfolded, there remained a distinct rhythm to the night. The soft hum of nature continued, the distant glow of the town's lamps flickered serenely, and the stars above sparkled with patient indifference. It was this contrast, the ordinary coexisting with the inexplicable, that created a uniquely compelling atmosphere. Listeners, gently transported into this scene, can almost feel the cool evening air on their skin, the hush of the town settling around them, and the subtle tension that arises when something unknown hovers just beyond the edge of perception. In this space between comfort and unease, the mind is allowed to wander, to imagine, and to relax, even as curiosity and wonder begin to stir. The significance of that night would not be immediately understood. No sirens blared, no headlines flashed the following morning. Instead, the town continued its routine, carrying the night like a secret shared quietly among its hills. Yet, for those who had glimpsed the unusual, the ordinary was never quite the same. Shadows seemed to hold stories, whispers of the wind hinted at unseen presences, and the gentle, humid night air carried a sense of possibility, the sense that the universe was larger, stranger, and more mysterious than most dared to imagine. It was within this delicate tension between serenity and mystery that the Varginha incident quietly took root, setting the stage for an event that would become one of Brazil's most enduring enigmas. By drawing the listener's attention to these calm, tangible details, the rustle of leaves, the subtle scents, the interplay of light and shadow, the story encourages a slow, meditative immersion. Sleepiness may begin to settle, yet the mind remains engaged, quietly wondering, observing, and floating alongside the narrative. The night of Varginha becomes not just a historical moment, but an experience, a gentle journey into mystery, where the ordinary meets the extraordinary, and where curiosity is cradled by calm. By the mid-1990s, Brazil was a nation balancing the rhythm of tradition with the stirrings of modern change. The shadows of political turmoil in previous decades had begun to recede, leaving a country cautiously embracing stability. In towns like Varginha, life maintained a measured, familiar pace. Streets were lined with simple homes, the aroma of freshly baked bread and simmering feijoada drifting from kitchens, and the sounds of children playing in dusty yards created a comforting soundtrack of ordinary life. Yet beyond this serene exterior, the country carried layers of complexity, social, political, and economic, that subtly shaped how events were perceived and remembered. Varginha, a small city in the state of Minas Gerais, existed in this delicate balance between the past and the present. Residents were accustomed to the quiet rhythms of agricultural life, the morning crow of roosters, the distant hum of trucks transporting produce, and the predictable patterns of seasonal weather. Yet these routines were interwoven with stories and traditions that reached back generations. Folklore, often shared in whispered conversations around evening fires, played an important role in shaping local perception. Tales of mysterious creatures, unexplained lights, and spirits lingering near forests were passed down, not as frightening myths, but as stories to ponder in the quiet moments of twilight. For the people of Varginha, the extraordinary often nestled comfortably within the ordinary, waiting for circumstances that might reveal it. Nationally, the 1990s were a period of cautious optimism. Brazil had transitioned from decades of military rule into a fragile democracy, where freedom of speech, press, and expression flourished, yet uncertainty lingered. Economic reforms sought to stabilize inflation and bring prosperity, while television and newspapers increasingly connected small towns to a broader world. Popular culture was vibrant, and news of unusual occurrences, strange lights in the sky, mysterious disappearances, or bizarre accidents, traveled quickly. UFO sightings, though still regarded skeptically by some, were not unheard of, and previous incidents such as the Operation Saucer in the Amazon during the 1970s had already captured the national imagination. By the time 1996 arrived, Brazil had developed a cultural lens through which extraterrestrial phenomena could be interpreted, a mix of curiosity, belief, and cautious skepticism. This cultural context deeply influenced the Varginha incident. People's minds were already attuned to the possibility of the unknown. Newspapers occasionally reported unexplained events with both fascination and doubt, and television programs explored paranormal mysteries with a blend of sensationalism and earnest inquiry. In towns like Varginha, rumors of strange sightings would spread quickly, whispered among neighbors, shared over evening coffee, or discussed in the quiet of a small local cafe. The lines between folklore, reality, and imagination were porous, allowing small anomalies to grow in significance. In essence, The town was primed for wonder, yet the mystery that would unfold did not need exaggeration. It was compelling enough on its own. Psychologically, the human mind has a natural tendency to seek patterns and meaning, especially in small communities where unusual events are rare. In the quiet nights of Varginha, when the world seemed safe and predictable, even subtle disturbances, flickering lights in the sky, the rustle of unseen movement in the woods were enough to capture attention and linger in memory. Experts in perception and memory note that small details are often amplified by communal storytelling, creating a narrative that feels vivid, credible, and enduring. In this way, the town's historical and cultural backdrop did more than provide a setting. It shaped the lens through which witnesses interpreted events, influencing both how they remembered the night and how they communicated it to others. This period in Brazil also carried the weight of international awareness about UFO phenomena. Globally, the 1990s saw a resurgence of interest in extraterrestrial life, with reports from the United States, Europe, and Latin America gaining traction in the press. Documentaries, books, and news articles reached curious audiences worldwide, lending legitimacy to the notion that unexplained aerial phenomena might merit serious consideration. For Brazilian residents, these global narratives reinforced the local folklore, offering a framework to understand sightings in the skies above Varginha. Even those who were naturally skeptical could not entirely escape the allure of possibility, a quiet, persistent curiosity that the mind could explore safely from the comfort of their homes. In small towns like Varginha, where daily life followed gentle, predictable rhythms, the arrival of the unexplained did more than startle. It created a shared collective experience. Neighbors would recount what they had seen or heard, comparing notes and validating each other's perceptions. This interplay between individual observation and communal reinforcement magnified the significance of the incident, ensuring that it would be remembered long after the initial events faded into memory. Historians observing the case note that cultural readiness, combined with small-town social dynamics, often determines which unusual events achieve legendary status and which are quickly forgotten. By understanding the historical and cultural fabric of Brazil in the 1990s, the listener begins to grasp why the Varginha incident resonated so profoundly. It was not only the strangeness of the sightings, but also the way the town's collective imagination, shaped by folklore, media, and national consciousness, provided fertile ground for a story that would endure for decades. The ordinary beauty of the town, the gentle hills, the humming night air, the quiet, communal life, became the canvas upon which the extraordinary would paint itself. As the listener settles further into this calm narrative, the stage is quietly set for the first real encounters with the unknown, where eyewitnesses would see, hear, and sense something beyond explanation, and the rhythm of the ordinary night would shift forever. As the quiet nights of Varginha stretched into the early hours, the town remained unaware that something unusual had begun to stir. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, as though the world itself were holding its breath. Residents reported a strange, distant glow along the hills, flickering intermittently like a lantern swaying in the wind. Some dismissed it at first, attributing the light to electrical faults, farm machinery, or a passing vehicle. But others, particularly those attuned to the rhythms of the countryside, felt an uneasy sense that something was different that night, something not entirely natural. The air seemed heavier, the darkness slightly thicker, and the usual chorus of crickets and frogs carried an underlying tension, as if the world were poised on the edge of a secret waiting to reveal itself. It was in this calm yet expectant atmosphere that the first significant encounters occurred. Among the earliest and most widely cited witnesses were three young women, Liliane, Valkyria, and Katia, who would later become central figures in the story. Walking home along quiet streets, their eyes caught movement near a dilapidated building on the outskirts of town. At first, it seemed almost like a trick of the light, a shadow shifting in the corner of the eye. Then, as they drew closer, they saw it, a small creature crouched, with skin that was dark brown and glistening under the faint streetlights. Its posture was unusual, almost mechanical in its stillness, yet undeniably alive. The creature's large red eyes reflected light in a way that made them seem luminous, deep and probing, as if peering directly into the observer's consciousness. The girls described a strange odor that accompanied the being, a scent that was earthy yet pungent, unfamiliar, and disconcerting. Their reactions were a mix of fear, curiosity, and disbelief, a natural blend that any human might feel when confronted with something truly outside the boundaries of normal experience. Yet despite their fear, they observed carefully, noticing details that would later become crucial to the narrative: the creature's small size, its thin, elongated limbs, and its unusual gait. Every motion seemed deliberate and cautious, as if the being were aware it was being watched, but lacked the ability, or perhaps the desire, to escape quickly. What made these early sightings particularly compelling was the consistency across multiple witnesses. Although only a few people encountered the creature directly at this stage, others reported glimpses of strange forms moving through the shadows, or of inexplicable lights near the same location. Farmers tending late crops mentioned that animals behaved oddly. Cows would stamp their feet nervously, dogs barked at empty spaces, and chickens refused to enter their coops. Such subtle anomalies created a mosaic of observation, each piece small, almost insignificant on its own, but together forming a picture that suggested something unusual had truly occurred. This pattern of corroborating details is crucial when assessing the credibility of eyewitness accounts. Researchers and psychologists note that when multiple independent observers report similar phenomena, the likelihood of a shared hallucination decreases. Yet memory is also a fluid, delicate thing. Under the influence of fear, anticipation, and the suggestive power of local folklore, human perception can magnify or distort certain elements. In Varginha, the cultural backdrop primed people to interpret unusual sights as potentially extraterrestrial. The blend of natural anxiety, communal storytelling, and the novelty of the experience created a powerful psychological environment, one that made the sightings both vivid and enduring in the memories of those who experienced them. Shortly after the girls' encounter, other reports began to trickle in. A local taxi driver recounted seeing a small humanoid figure dart across an empty street, vanishing as if into thin air. Firefighters, responding to a routine call, described strange tracks near a wooded area, tracks that appeared to be neither human nor animal, with impressions too shallow to indicate heavy weight, yet too deliberate to be random. Even policemen stationed near the outskirts reported unusual phenomena: unexplainable lights hovering low over fields, the faint hum of an unseen engine, and shadows moving against the wind. Each individual observation, when presented alone, might have been easily dismissed, but collectively, they painted a picture of something both elusive and undeniably present. The descriptions of the creatures themselves were strikingly similar across multiple witnesses. They were generally small, roughly 1 meter in height, with disproportionately large heads and slender limbs. The eyes, consistently reported as reddish and luminescent, were perhaps the most haunting feature, giving an impression of awareness and intelligence. While some witnesses mentioned a slight distortion in the creature's skin, or unusual movement patterns, all emphasized the overall sense of otherworldliness, the subtle way it moved, the stillness punctuated by sudden precise motions, and the unmistakable impression that it was not entirely of this world. Historians and UFO researchers often point to these details as what sets Varginha apart from other cases. The combination of multiple independent eyewitness accounts, physical observations, such as footprints or disturbances in the environment, and the small-town setting, where residents were familiar with the usual nocturnal wildlife, all contribute to a scenario that is unusually well documented. Skeptics argue alternative explanations: misidentified animals, deformed humans, or mass hysteria. But even these accounts struggle to fully account for the sheer number of consistent details and the intense personal reactions reported by the witnesses. Equally important is the subtle way the witnesses' experiences were documented. Journalists and investigators approached the town cautiously, often interviewing people weeks after the sightings had occurred. Despite the passage of time, key details remained intact: the size of the creature, its posture, its red eyes, and even the strange odor noted by the girls. Memory studies suggest that core, emotionally charged elements of an experience are retained more reliably than peripheral details. The vividness of these accounts, therefore, may reflect the intensity of the experience itself, rather than embellishment. In essence, the night's events were not just seen, they were deeply felt, leaving an impression that would echo in the minds of those who had witnessed them. By focusing on these early sightings, the narrative slowly builds a bridge between ordinary life and the extraordinary. The town's quiet streets, gentle night air, and rolling hills form a canvas, while the creatures and the subtle disturbances create brushstrokes of intrigue. For the listener, this section is designed to encourage both relaxation and a soft sense of wonder, the type of curiosity that feels safe, yet irresistible. Even as the mind begins to drift toward sleep, the ordinary world is still present, grounding the experience, but now there is a thread of mystery woven through it, hinting that reality is more fluid and enigmatic than it might first appear. The night of Varginha, seen through these first encounters, becomes a delicate interplay of observation, interpretation, and memory. Witnesses perceived something genuinely unusual, and their accounts, whether viewed through a skeptical lens or one of belief, carry a quiet weight that lingers. It is within this space, at the intersection of calm, familiar life and subtle, inexplicable phenomena, that the story truly begins to unfold. The stage is now set for the town's deeper experiences, the ripple of rumors, the arrival of authorities, and the slow escalation of events that would cement Varginha's place as one of the most intriguing modern UFO mysteries. As the night stretched on, and word of the strange sightings began to circulate, the quiet rhythm of Varginha began to shift ever so subtly. At first, the murmurs were gentle, whispered conversations shared between neighbors who had seen lights flickering across the hills or caught fleeting glimpses of something small and unusual moving through the shadows. These whispers carried a mixture of awe, curiosity, and unease, the kind of delicate tension that tends to grow quietly in small towns where life is usually predictable. It was not fear in its rawest form, but a soft, pervasive sense that the world might be slightly larger, stranger, and more mysterious than anyone had realized. Soon the whispers began to take shape as rumors, passed from person to person in a chain that grew with every retelling. The stories were not yet sensationalized. They were tentative, cautious interpretations of what people had seen. Yet each retelling added nuance, whether consciously or not. Some said the creature had disappeared into the nearby woods. Others suggested that it had been captured. Children told their parents about strange shadows darting past their windows. Even those who had not seen anything directly felt the subtle weight of possibility, imagining the unseen in the quiet spaces of their homes. The night, once ordinary, now seemed layered with a hidden reality just beyond perception. It was during this time that reports of unusual activity began to emerge from the outskirts of the town. Residents described unfamiliar vehicles moving along back roads, trucks without markings, and soldiers in uniform who seemed out of place in the familiar streets of Varginha. The sound of engines, the faint glow of headlights cutting through the darkness, and the occasional glimpse of figures moving deliberately through fields created a palpable sense that something was happening beyond the ordinary eye. The human mind, already attuned to the possibility of the unknown, begins to notice these subtleties with increased intensity. A rustling in the trees, a shadow in a window, or an unexpected noise at night becomes a thread in a larger, unfolding tapestry of mystery. The presence of authorities, both official and mysterious, contributed significantly to the growing sense of unease. Military personnel were reported to be in areas normally quiet and undisturbed, conducting what appeared to be careful surveillance or investigation. Witnesses later described seeing men in uniform, moving in organized patterns, some carrying equipment, others appearing to examine the landscape with intense focus. Even without direct contact, these movements were enough to suggest that something beyond ordinary understanding was occurring. To the residents of Varginha, the ordinary world of quiet streets and simple routines was intersecting with a dimension that was controlled, deliberate, and hidden. Rumors began to crystallize into narratives. Some townspeople believed that one or more creatures had been captured and transported to a nearby military base. Others speculated that the glowing lights in the hills were connected to secret experiments or alien technology. As stories spread, they were colored by the natural human tendency to fill in gaps with imagination, especially in environments where certainty is scarce. Psychologists studying similar events note that in small communities, ambiguity often breeds collective storytelling. When multiple individuals observe anomalies and share their interpretations, the narrative can take on a life of its own, becoming both a reflection of the event and a projection of communal hopes, fears, and curiosities. Yet amid these growing narratives, there was a thread of consistency that makes the Varginha incident particularly compelling. Independent witnesses, farmers, shopkeepers, and local officials reported similar experiences: strange creatures with small stature and red eyes, unusual odors lingering in the air, and glimpses of lights in the sky. Even the reported presence of military personnel was corroborated by multiple observers, suggesting that the unusual activity was not merely a product of rumor. The combination of independent testimonies and observable, physical phenomena created a layered puzzle that historians and UFO researchers continue to examine. The psychological dynamics of panic and rumor are subtle but powerful. Fear does not always manifest as overt terror. It often emerges quietly, shaping behavior and perception without conscious awareness. Residents of Varginha began to alter routines, avoiding certain roads at night, checking on neighbors, and sharing observations with increasing attention to detail. In small communities, these adjustments amplify collective awareness. Every unusual sound or light becomes meaningful, every shadow a potential clue. The night, once a simple companion to sleep, transforms into a canvas upon which imagination and reality intertwine. Importantly, the town's growing attention to the unexplained did not immediately disrupt daily life. Markets remained open, children still played in the afternoon sun, and families continued evening meals. Yet beneath the surface of normalcy, a subtle current of anticipation and curiosity flowed. This delicate balance between ordinary life and the extraordinary created a psychological environment perfectly suited for the emergence of legend. The town's collective consciousness, now tinged with wonder and uncertainty, was ready to witness further events, each observation reinforcing the sense that something unusual had entered their world. Military and governmental involvement, whether fully transparent or partially concealed, added an additional layer of intrigue. The very presence of authorities, their vehicles, and their movements, seen but not fully explained, reinforced the narrative of mystery. For townspeople, this combination of sightings, rumors, and observed official activity created a quietly escalating sense that reality itself was bending in subtle ways. The interplay between ordinary life, emerging stories, and unseen authority laid the foundation for a rich tapestry of intrigue, where the lines between fact and interpretation, observation and imagination, were softly blurred. By the end of these early days, the town had been transformed in ways almost imperceptible to an outside observer. The streets remained quiet, the lights still glowed gently along the hills, and the night air carried the familiar sense of earth and vegetation. Yet residents had experienced a shift in perception. Shadows seemed fuller, the air more charged, and the world more alive with potential secrets. The combination of first-hand observations, whispered rumors, and subtle signs of official presence created a layered narrative that would carry forward into the eyewitness accounts, the media storm, and the competing theories that followed. For the listener, this stage of the story is a slow, deliberate immersion into the growing mystery, allowing curiosity and relaxation to coexist, drawing them gently forward into the unfolding enigma of Varginha. As the events of that night continued to ripple through Varginha, more observers began to share their experiences, each adding a new layer to the quietly unfolding mystery. Beyond the initial sightings of the three young women, the town became populated with a subtle tension as residents, police officers, and local workers began to notice things that did not fit into the ordinary patterns of life. The calm of routine, a tractor humming in the distance, a dog barking at a passing vehicle, the whisper of wind through the trees, was now occasionally interrupted by hints of something unusual, something that stirred the imagination without ever fully revealing itself. Among the most compelling testimonies came from the farmers who lived on the outskirts of the town. Accustomed to observing the rhythms of nature, these men and women were finely attuned to the subtle changes in their environment. One farmer reported noticing his cattle behaving strangely. Some huddled together, trembling and unsteady, while others simply refused to move from a particular patch of land. Dogs barked incessantly at empty fields, and nocturnal animals were unusually quiet, as though wary of something unseen. These details, small on their own, collectively suggested an alteration in the natural order, a subtle disturbance that caught the attention of those most familiar with the land. Firefighters were another group whose experiences added a striking layer of credibility and intrigue. Responding to a routine call one evening, several local firefighters reported encountering a small humanoid figure near a wooded area. The being, described as no more than a meter tall, moved with a deliberate, cautious gait, and possessed the same distinctive large red eyes noted by earlier witnesses. Though the firefighters attempted to approach, the creature retreated, vanishing into the shadows with an agility that seemed almost unnatural. The firefighters' testimony is notable because it came from trained professionals who were accustomed to assessing unusual situations, fires, accidents, or other emergencies, but who had no previous context for such an encounter. Their observations, calm and detailed, added a sense of grounded realism to the growing story. Local law enforcement officers also reported strange occurrences that same week. Policeman Marco Eli Cherisi, in particular, would later become a central figure in the Varginha narrative. On the night of the sightings, Cherisi and his colleagues were called to investigate reports of a strange creature near a residential area. According to testimony, Cherisi approached the being carefully, noting its small stature, elongated limbs, and distinctive red eyes. While skeptics have questioned aspects of this account, the details provided by Cherisi align closely with other independent observations, reinforcing the possibility of a genuine, unexplained phenomenon. Tragically, Cherisi later died under circumstances that some have connected, though never conclusively, to the events of that night, adding a somber and haunting dimension to the narrative. Even as these professional accounts emerged, ordinary townspeople continued to report subtle, eerie experiences. Shopkeepers described seeing strange shadows in their store windows, movement at the edge of perception that disappeared whenever approached. Children, with their keen sensitivity to unusual stimuli, spoke of little men hiding behind trees or peeking around corners. The consistency across such diverse witnesses, trained professionals, farmers, civilians, and children, creates a compelling mosaic, suggesting that multiple independent observers had experienced something outside the bounds of ordinary life. Researchers and psychologists studying eyewitness phenomena note that consistency across independent reports is a key factor in assessing credibility. When multiple individuals, each with their own perspective and level of experience, describe similar characteristics, size, posture, movement, and unusual features, it strengthens the likelihood that something genuinely unusual was observed. At the same time, human memory and perception are fluid, capable of distortion under stress or suggestion. In Varginha, the subtle fear and heightened curiosity present throughout the town created conditions where witnesses paid extraordinary attention to detail, retaining vivid impressions while also interpreting them through the lens of local folklore and cultural beliefs. Physical details reported by witnesses added another layer of intrigue. Several accounts described footprints in soft soil or mud, impressions that appeared small and elongated, with patterns unlike any known animal native to the region. Firefighters and police noted unusual odors lingering in areas where the creature was seen, an earthy, metallic scent that defied explanation. These subtle physical cues contributed to the sense that the sightings were not entirely subjective. There were traces left behind in the environment, however faint, that corroborated the experiences of multiple observers. The stories from these varied witnesses gradually formed a coherent, if enigmatic, picture. The creatures were small, roughly 1 meter in height, with disproportionately large heads and spindly limbs. Their eyes, consistently reported as glowing red, were perhaps the most arresting feature, giving an impression of intelligence and awareness. Their movement was deliberate, cautious, and sometimes unnervingly quick, as though they possessed knowledge of the surrounding environment beyond what humans could perceive. Every observer emphasized a sense of presence, a subtle awareness that these beings were conscious, alert, and perhaps capable of more than human senses could fully understand. One of the most intriguing aspects of the eyewitness accounts is the combination of fear and fascination that they evoke. Witnesses describe being simultaneously unsettled and captivated, their attention drawn irresistibly to the creatures, despite a natural instinct to flee. Psychologists explain that this dual response, fear tempered by curiosity, is common when humans encounter novel or unexplained stimuli. It allows the observer to remain engaged, to notice details that might otherwise be overlooked, and to encode the experience deeply into memory. In Varginha, this dynamic may help explain the remarkable consistency of the descriptions across different witnesses and contexts. Even as the accounts accumulated, the town retained its characteristic calm during the day, a gentle counterpoint to the growing tension of night. Children played in the sun, families went about their daily routines, and the markets carried on with the familiar rhythm of commerce. Yet the knowledge that something unusual might be present lingered, like a subtle vibration beneath the surface of normal life. It was within this quiet balance between the ordinary and the extraordinary, between routine and mystery, that the Varginha incident embedded itself so firmly in the collective consciousness of the town. By focusing on the detailed testimonies of farmers, firefighters, and policemen, the narrative reinforces the sense that the events of Varginha were not mere fantasy or exaggeration. These accounts, grounded in careful observation and professional experience, provide a tangible bridge from the early, almost ethereal sightings to the broader, more complex investigation that would soon unfold. For the listener, this section deepens immersion. The quiet hills, the soft night air, and the gentle hum of everyday life are all present, but now threaded with subtle tension and wonder. Curiosity grows, but in a way that is calm, contemplative, and perfectly suited for the slow, hypnotic pace of a sleep story narrative. The stage is now prepared for the next unfolding layer of the story: the media's attention, governmental response, and the increasing sense that the mystery of Varginha was not confined to the quiet streets of a small town, but was beginning to echo across larger stages. Yet at this moment, the focus remains intimate, personal, and deeply human. The quiet courage of witnesses, the small, elusive movements of the creatures, and the subtle ripple of mystery that had begun to touch every corner of Varginha. As the days passed after the initial sightings, the quiet streets of Varginha began to carry whispers beyond the town itself. Small conversations that once took place behind closed doors or across fences were now part of a larger ripple. Soon, journalists from across Brazil arrived, drawn by the peculiar combination of eyewitness accounts, subtle physical traces, and the whispered rumors of strange lights and small creatures. Newspapers published cautiously worded articles, while local television crews filmed the familiar hills and streets, capturing the town's ordinary life framed by an emerging extraordinary story. The media treated the events delicately at first, mindful of skepticism but unable to ignore the growing curiosity of the public. The way the media covered the events created an unusual dynamic. For some residents, the attention brought a quiet pride, a sense that their town had become a focal point of global curiosity. For others, it introduced anxiety, as stories were reshaped, details highlighted, and speculative interpretations offered alongside eyewitness testimony. Television anchors spoke with solemnity, narrating accounts of creatures with red eyes and strange postures, often pausing to note that official sources had yet to confirm or deny the events. Newspapers juxtaposed cautious reporting with dramatic headlines, crafting a gentle tension that both informed and mystified. For the people of Varginha, who were accustomed to quiet life, this sudden illumination by national attention was surreal. Government officials, meanwhile, responded with a careful combination of denial and ambiguity. Military authorities insisted that nothing extraordinary had occurred, offering explanations rooted in ordinary phenomena, a deformed human, misidentified animals, or simply the product of overactive imagination. Yet their statements were sometimes vague, inconsistent, and slow to arrive, allowing the seeds of doubt to flourish in the fertile soil of uncertainty. Observers noted an unusual presence of military personnel near the town's outskirts, conducting what appeared to be investigations, yet providing no detailed explanation. This mixture of visibility and silence created a subtle psychological tension that was both unsettling and mesmerizing. The effect of this duality, media attention paired with government ambiguity, was profound. Residents who had observed strange phenomena were faced with a world that simultaneously validated and questioned their experiences. The media amplified their stories, giving them a broader audience, while the authorities offered rational explanations that seemed at odds with personal perception. This interplay deepened the mystery, creating a space where imagination and observation coexisted. For the listener, it creates a hypnotic tension. The known and the unknown exist side by side, and curiosity can wander freely without fear of harsh contradiction. International media also began to take notice, slowly weaving Varginha into the broader narrative of global UFO phenomena. News outlets in Europe and North America highlighted the striking similarities to other well-known incidents, such as Roswell in the United States, while emphasizing the peculiarities that made Varginha unique: the small size of the creatures, the vivid eyewitness descriptions, and the apparent involvement of local authorities. This external interest lent a sense of legitimacy to the story, creating the impression that something beyond ordinary life had truly occurred. Yet even with this attention, definitive proof remained elusive, maintaining the delicate balance between intrigue and uncertainty. Researchers and skeptics alike examined the case with meticulous care. UFO researchers were drawn to the consistency across multiple independent eyewitness accounts, noting the unusual convergence of civilian, professional, and law enforcement testimony. Skeptics, meanwhile, pointed to the potential for misinterpretation, mass hysteria, and media exaggeration. Yet even critics acknowledged the persistent anomalies that could not be easily explained, particularly the subtle physical evidence and the strikingly similar creature descriptions. The coexistence of explanation and mystery deepened the narrative, allowing the town of Varginha to occupy a unique space in UFO lore, one grounded in both human experience and unanswered questions. The human element of this phase of the story is particularly compelling. Ordinary residents, thrust into the glare of public attention, were faced with a delicate dance of credibility and self-preservation. Some welcomed the curiosity, eager to share their experiences and contribute to the unfolding narrative. Others, wary of judgment or ridicule, spoke cautiously, choosing words with care, while their memories retained the vivid impressions of what they had seen. In this quiet tension, the town itself became a character, a place where reality, perception, and imagination intertwined, creating a subtle, ongoing drama that unfolded at a slow, hypnotic pace. One remarkable aspect of the media and government response was its subtle effect on public perception. For the townspeople, the presence of journalists lent attention and weight to their experiences, while official silence or contradictory statements created an air of controlled ambiguity. This combination allowed curiosity and imagination to flourish, encouraging residents and later audiences to consider the possibility of extraordinary phenomena without the pressure of immediate conclusion. The narrative of Varginha became less about proving or disproving events, and more about inhabiting a space of wonder, uncertainty, and quiet reflection. By the time attention reached its peak, Varginha had become a nexus of subtle tension, curiosity, and mystery. The town's streets remained familiar and peaceful, yet every rustle in the trees, every distant glow in the hills, and every whispered account carried an undercurrent of something unusual, perhaps inexplicable. The media's focus, coupled with government reticence, amplified this effect, transforming a local encounter into a story of global fascination. For the listener, this phase of the story encourages calm attention. One can imagine walking the quiet streets, sensing the rhythm of normal life, yet feeling the soft pull of the extraordinary just beyond perception. In this interplay of observation, reportage, and authority, the narrative of Varginha matured. It was no longer just a series of individual experiences. It had become a phenomenon embedded in the social consciousness, both locally and internationally. The listener is drawn into this unfolding drama gently, invited to consider the quiet tension between what is seen, what is reported, and what remains unknown. It is a delicate balance of curiosity, imagination, and calm reflection, an ideal moment for the mind to both absorb and drift, carrying the story softly forward into the next stage, where competing theories and explanations begin to take shape, deepening the sense of wonder and intrigue. As the story of Varginha spread through newspapers, television, and whispered conversations, a natural question arose. What exactly had people seen? For every eyewitness who described small, red-eyed creatures, there was an explanation waiting in the wings, some grounded in skepticism, others steeped in intrigue. The town and the world beyond became a quiet arena for speculation, where multiple theories coexisted, each offering a different lens through which to interpret the events. The interplay of these ideas, ranging from the scientifically plausible to the fantastically mysterious, added another layer of complexity and fascination to the unfolding story. One of the earliest and most widely discussed explanations was that the creatures were simply misidentified animals or humans. Skeptics suggested that residents had seen a stray, deformed animal, a monkey, perhaps, lost in the unfamiliar terrain of the town's outskirts. Others posited that a person with a rare medical condition could have been involved, seen from a distance in poor lighting, and then misinterpreted under conditions of surprise and anxiety. These theories appealed to rationality, emphasizing known biological phenomena over the extraordinary. Yet, even these explanations struggled to account for the consistency of descriptions, the precise red eyes, the humanoid posture, and the simultaneous reports from multiple independent witnesses, including trained professionals, like firefighters and policemen. Another set of theories delved into the possibility of extraterrestrial visitation. Proponents argued that the small stature, large heads, and unusual movements of the creatures closely matched accounts from other UFO incidents worldwide. Supporters of this explanation pointed to the unusual odors reported, the peculiar footprints, and the simultaneous appearance of strange lights in the sky. For these observers, the evidence, though circumstantial, suggested that Varginha could have been the site of an extraterrestrial encounter, a brief, fleeting glimpse of life from beyond Earth. This theory captured the imagination of many, blending curiosity with the possibility of something profoundly mysterious, a reminder that the universe might hold more than the familiar landscapes of forests and hills. A more nuanced perspective combined elements of both skepticism and speculation. Some researchers suggested that the creatures could have been part of a secret government experiment, perhaps involving genetic manipulation or advanced biological research. They argued that the military presence observed in the area, coupled with the government's inconsistent statements, hinted at a controlled, classified situation. While there was little hard evidence to support this theory, It persisted because it provided a plausible explanation for the combination of small humanoid creatures and the presence of authorities, an intersection of the strange and the official that fit the mysterious pattern witnessed by so many. The psychological dimension of the incident also offered insight into the competing theories. Human perception is delicate and deeply influenced by expectation, fear, and cultural context. In small towns like Varginha, residents were already primed by folklore, prior UFO reports, and local legend to interpret unusual sights as extraordinary. Psychologists studying similar phenomena note that ambiguous stimuli, a rustling in the trees, a distant light, or an unfamiliar shape, can be filtered through layers of expectation, producing highly detailed, emotionally charged experiences that feel entirely real. This perspective does not dismiss eyewitness accounts, but suggests that the mind's natural pattern-seeking tendencies may amplify and shape perceptions in ways that blur the line between observed reality and psychological experience. Adding to the richness of competing explanations are the subtle, credible anomalies that resist easy categorization. Independent observers reported consistent details across different locations and times: the creature's size, the glowing red eyes, and certain physical behaviors that were hard to attribute to known animals. Physical traces, like footprints with unusual proportions and impressions left in soft soil, further complicated straightforward explanations. Even skeptics often acknowledged that while misidentification and suggestion might explain parts of the story, these consistent, repeated anomalies posed a puzzle that remained unsolved. This tension between rational explanation and lingering mystery is a defining feature of the Varginha case, creating a narrative space where curiosity, wonder, and critical thought coexist. Cultural factors also played a role in shaping the competing theories. Brazil, with its rich tradition of folklore and storytelling, provided a fertile backdrop for extraordinary interpretation. Tales of spirits, mysterious creatures, and hidden forces in the natural world were part of the cultural fabric, subtly influencing how events were perceived and recounted. When something unusual occurred, like the Varginha sightings, it was interpreted through a blend of lived experience, community storytelling, and cultural memory. In this sense, the theories themselves became part of a larger story, a reflection of how humans across time and place attempt to make sense of the unknown, weaving together observation, imagination, and collective belief. Even decades later, the debate continues. Researchers, historians, and UFO enthusiasts revisit the evidence, examining photographs, reports, and interviews with witnesses. Skeptics often focus on inconsistencies and alternative explanations, while believers emphasize the convergence of independent observations and unexplained anomalies. Importantly, both perspectives contribute to the richness of the narrative. The coexistence of multiple theories allows the listener to inhabit a space of gentle curiosity, pondering the possibilities without feeling pressured to accept one explanation over another. It is a slow, meditative engagement with mystery, where the mind can explore, question, and wonder, all within the calm rhythm of storytelling. The Varginha incident exemplifies a phenomenon observed in many unexplained events worldwide: the interplay between evidence, interpretation, and imagination. Some details point toward the extraordinary, others suggest rational explanation. Some witnesses are deeply convinced of what they saw, while others remain uncertain. The quiet tension between these competing narratives is part of what makes the story enduring. It reminds listeners that not all mysteries are solved neatly, and that uncertainty itself can be a space of fascination and reflection. For the people of Varginha, as well as for those observing from afar, the truth may be elusive, but the experience of wonder is undeniably real. By exploring these competing theories, the listener is invited to engage with the story on multiple levels. One can imagine walking through the quiet streets, sensing the presence of the unexplained, while considering rational alternatives. One can float in the hills at night, watching shadows and light, wondering whether what is seen is ordinary, extraordinary, or somewhere in between. This duality, between curiosity and calm, between skepticism and fascination, allows the narrative to breathe, providing the perfect balance for a sleep story format that is both relaxing and intellectually engaging. In the quiet aftermath of discussion and debate, the story of Varginha remains unresolved, yet the threads of possibility are carefully woven into the collective consciousness. Each theory, whether skeptical, scientific, paranormal, or extraterrestrial, adds texture to the narrative, creating a gentle tension that invites contemplation without urgency. Listeners can drift alongside the story, exploring the calm hills, the whispering trees, and the fleeting glimpses of light and shadow, carrying the sense that the universe is more layered and mysterious than ordinary perception might suggest. This interplay of uncertainty and imagination is the essence of the Varginha mystery, a quietly compelling enigma, rich with detail, that lingers softly in the mind long after the tale has been told. Even as the immediate events of the Varginha incident faded from daily headlines, their echoes persisted, quietly shaping the cultural landscape of Brazil and beyond. The town, once an unassuming collection of streets, hills, and farms, became a subtle touchstone for discussions of mystery, unexplained phenomena, and the boundaries of human perception. The incident's cultural influence emerged gradually, woven into media, folklore, academic study, and collective memory. It was not loud or ostentatious. It did not roar like a headline, but it seeped into the fabric of imagination, creating a legacy that was both gentle and enduring, perfectly aligned with the calm, reflective rhythms of everyday life. Local folklore absorbed the events seamlessly, adding them to a long lineage of mysterious stories and unexplained occurrences in Minas Gerais. Children grew up hearing quiet versions of the tale from parents and grandparents, told with a mixture of awe and caution. The story of small, red-eyed creatures wandering the outskirts of Varginha became a whispered legend, a narrative that connected the ordinary rhythms of the town, morning markets, afternoon chores, evening gatherings, with the extraordinary. In this way, the incident became a bridge between the known and the unknown, a story that invited curiosity while leaving space for imagination. Nationally, the Varginha incident contributed to the broader discourse on UFOs and extraterrestrial phenomena. Documentaries, books, and journalistic pieces referenced the events, often highlighting the town's unique combination of multiple independent eyewitness accounts, subtle physical traces, and the apparent involvement of authorities. For scholars and enthusiasts alike, the story represented a case study in how small, carefully documented events could resonate far beyond their immediate context. It offered insight into human perception, collective memory, and the ways in which extraordinary experiences become embedded in social consciousness. The incident also inspired artistic and cultural expressions. Local artists, filmmakers, and writers found in Varginha a quiet source of intrigue, exploring themes of mystery, uncertainty, and the thin veil between ordinary life and the unexplained. Even within subtle storytelling mediums, illustrated books, radio dramas, or calm narrated audio, the town's night skies and shadowed hills provided a rich canvas for exploring curiosity, fear, and wonder. Unlike sensationalized accounts, these portrayals emphasized atmosphere, detail, and emotional resonance, reflecting the meditative quality of the original events. In this way, Varginha's cultural influence became a gentle rhythm, flowing through art and storytelling without overwhelming the imagination. Psychologically, the story contributed to a collective understanding of mystery as a nuanced, human experience. The creature's elusive nature, the calm presence of eyewitnesses, and the subtle tension created by military and media involvement offered lessons in perception, memory, and narrative formation. Researchers studying the phenomenon noted that communities like Varginha illustrate how unexplained events can shape identity, memory, and cultural cohesion. The town itself became a symbol of careful observation, cautious storytelling, and the delicate balance between skepticism and belief, a place where the extraordinary is approached with calm curiosity rather than fear or frenzy. Globally, Varginha joined a network of famous UFO and paranormal cases, often compared to Roswell, Rendlesham Forest, or the Belgian UFO wave. Yet, unlike many other incidents, its narrative retained a uniquely grounded quality. The small town setting, the vivid yet measured eyewitness accounts, and the absence of dramatic sensationalized spectacle allowed the story to circulate without losing its subtle intimacy. Scholars, writers, and enthusiasts highlight this aspect as a defining characteristic. Varginha's mystery is immersive because it is human-scaled, allowing observers to imagine themselves within the quiet hills and empty streets, where the unknown quietly made its presence known. Tourism also reflected this cultural legacy, though in understated ways. Curious visitors, researchers, and UFO enthusiasts occasionally traveled to Varginha to experience the town's atmosphere, to walk its streets at dusk, and to imagine the quiet nights when the sightings occurred. Local guides often framed the narrative gently, emphasizing observation, storytelling, and the town's serene beauty rather than sensational spectacle. This approach maintained the calm, reflective tone that has always defined the incident's cultural imprint, allowing the story to persist in memory and imagination, rather than merely headlines or viral fascination. The legacy of Varginha also persists in education and research. Universities, local historians, and UFO researchers examine the incident to understand how human perception, memory, and communal storytelling interact with extraordinary events. Studies highlight the interplay of eyewitness testimony, cultural framing, and physical evidence, demonstrating that the town's experience is not only a story of mystery, but also a lesson in observation, interpretation, and careful documentation. The case has become a reference point, quietly influencing how modern researchers approach similar phenomena with rigor, empathy, and an appreciation for nuance. Finally, the cultural influence of Varginha endures because it invites contemplation rather than resolution. Unlike many stories that demand immediate answers or provoke anxiety, the narrative of the town is slow, gentle, and open-ended. Listeners and readers are encouraged to wander through the hills, imagine the soft glow of distant lights, and feel the subtle presence of something unseen, all while maintaining a sense of calm. This combination of intrigue and tranquility ensures that the story persists in memory, gently echoing in conversations, media, and imagination, long after the events themselves. By embedding itself in culture, memory, and imagination, Varginha has achieved a quiet immortality. The town's streets remain ordinary, the hills still roll gently into the distance, and the nights retain the same calm rhythm that residents have always known. Yet woven through these familiar textures is a subtle awareness that reality may carry layers beyond immediate perception, a reminder that the ordinary and extraordinary can coexist, and that curiosity, reflection, and wonder are as much a part of human experience as the rhythm of daily life itself. For the listener, this moment in the narrative encourages a deep, reflective calm, perfectly aligned with the meditative pace of a sleep story, and sets the stage for the final section: reflection, closure, and the gentle invitation to imagine the unknown. As we reach the quiet conclusion of the Varginha incident, it is worth pausing to reflect on what this story truly represents, not just the events of a few nights in 1996, but the delicate interplay of human perception, curiosity, and imagination. The town itself, with its gently rolling hills, modest streets, and serene night skies, remains unchanged in many ways, yet the memory of those nights lingers like a subtle current beneath the surface of everyday life. For the people of Varginha, the story is more than an anecdote about strange creatures or fleeting lights. It is a reflection of how ordinary life can intersect with the extraordinary, leaving an imprint on memory and culture that endures across decades. Reflection invites us to consider the many layers of the narrative. There are the eyewitnesses, the young women, farmers, firefighters, and policemen, whose careful observations provide the foundation for everything that followed. Their experiences, recorded with care and often corroborated across multiple independent accounts, remind us of the delicate balance between perception and interpretation. Each detail, the glow of red eyes, the unusual gait of small figures, the faint scent lingering in the night air, tells a story not only of the mysterious beings themselves, but also of the human capacity to notice, remember, and share the subtle nuances of what is seen. There is also the layer of societal response, the whispers of neighbors, the arrival of journalists, and the understated but persistent presence of authorities. Together, these elements demonstrate how communities collectively interpret unusual phenomena. When small towns confront the unexplained, a natural rhythm emerges, curiosity tempered by caution, wonder mingled with skepticism, and imagination held gently alongside observation. This interplay, quiet and unobtrusive, reflects a broader human tendency to seek meaning in the unknown, while maintaining a sense of equilibrium and calm, a principle that resonates deeply within the soothing cadence of a sleep story narrative. The media's careful balance between reporting and sensationalism, coupled with the government's ambiguity, adds another layer of intrigue. For the outside world, Varginha became both a case study and a subtle reminder that mystery can exist even in well-documented, seemingly ordinary settings. The tension between attention and secrecy, between public curiosity and private experience, enriches the narrative without overwhelming it. It allows us to imagine walking through quiet streets at dusk, hearing the soft rustle of leaves, and sensing the unseen without fear, simply observing, contemplating, and gently wondering. Competing theories, as explored earlier, also play an important role in reflection. Whether one leans toward rational explanations, speculative science, or the possibility of extraterrestrial presence, the diversity of interpretations highlights the profound complexity of human experience. Mystery is not always about definitive answers, often it is about inhabiting a space of curiosity and openness. In Varginha, the coexistence of multiple explanations encourages the mind to wander thoughtfully, to explore what-if scenarios, while remaining grounded in the calm reality of the town's quiet hills and evening skies. Culturally, the legacy of Varginha invites reflection on storytelling itself. Folklore, media narratives, academic study, and personal recollection intersect to create a tapestry that is at once real, imagined, and deeply human. The subtle persistence of the tale in books, documentaries, and gentle oral storytelling reflects the enduring power of mystery to inspire thought, evoke wonder, and connect generations. It demonstrates that the unknown is not something to fear, but something to observe, contemplate, and respect, a quiet invitation to see the world with attention and openness. In a way, the story of Varginha mirrors the rhythm of sleep itself. There are moments of observation, where details stand out sharply, a red eye glimmering in the dark, a strange sound across the hills, a fleeting movement in the shadows. There are moments of interpretation, where the mind gently constructs understanding, weaving fragments into patterns. And there are moments of letting go, where curiosity drifts alongside calm, the edges of mystery fading into gentle acceptance. This ebb and flow, between attention, reflection, and surrender, is what makes the narrative suitable for relaxation and contemplation, allowing the listener to carry both wonder and calm into rest. Finally, reflecting on Varginha invites a broader meditation on the unknown. Across time and space, humanity has encountered mysteries, lights in the sky, creatures in the darkness, phenomena that defy easy explanation. What makes these moments compelling is not only their strangeness, but also the way they engage our senses, emotions, and imagination. Varginha reminds us that the ordinary and extraordinary often exist side by side, that calm observation can coexist with wonder, and that the mind can safely explore mystery without fear. It is a gentle lesson in curiosity, a subtle encouragement to remain open to the possibilities that lie just beyond the familiar. As the night deepens and the mind begins to drift, the story of Varginha settles into quiet reflection. The hills are still, the streets are peaceful, and the town retains its modest, enduring rhythm. Yet beneath this calm surface, a faint pulse of mystery lingers, a reminder that the world is more layered, more intricate, and more enchanting than immediate perception might suggest. It is here, in this gentle space, between awareness and imagination, that the narrative leaves the listener, softly questioning, calmly curious, and ready to embrace both the seen and the unseen. In the end, Varginha is not simply a tale of strange creatures or unexplained phenomena. It is a story of human perception, communal memory, and the delicate beauty of uncertainty. It teaches us that mystery need not be loud or disruptive. It can be quiet, reflective, and deeply immersive. It encourages a slow, gentle curiosity, inviting the mind to explore, imagine, and rest in the soft interplay of the ordinary and extraordinary. As the story fades into the night, it leaves a subtle, enduring impression, the knowledge that the world is always richer, deeper, and more mysterious than it first appears, and that calm attention allows us to experience that wonder fully, without fear.